Take a walk through any major American city in 2025, and what do you see? Rows of tents stretching for blocks in places that used to be prime real estate. People strung out on fentanyl, passed out on sidewalks, motionless like zombies. Once beautiful parks where kids used to play, now filled with trash, human waste, and makeshift encampments. And business owners shutting down their stores, fed up with the daily theft, vandalism, and aggressive panhandlers chasing away customers. This isn't some dystopian movie or exaggerated documentary. This is real life in American cities in 2025. Take San Francisco, what was once an iconic city with stunning architecture, vibrant culture, and thriving businesses, has now become an unlivable wasteland. Whole streets are occupied by tents, and tourists no longer feel safe. Popular retailers like Nordstrom, Walgreens, and Whole Foods have abandoned the city because of unchecked theft and violence. Los Angeles is no better. Skid Row has expanded beyond its usual borders, with tent cities popping up along Venice Beach, Hollywood Boulevard, and even Beverly Hills. The city has spent billions on homeless programs, yet the problem has only gotten worse. New York City, Chicago, Portland, Seattle, all these cities suffering the same fate. Once thriving downtown areas are now filled with desperate people struggling to survive in a system that has completely failed them. This wasn't always America's reality. If you look at photos of the same cities a few decades ago, you'll see a completely different country. Major cities had crime, of course, but we were much safer and we were not full of people living on the streets. It's gotten so bad that in New York City, the homelessness crisis has overwhelmed the subway system, with reports of entire train cars being used as makeshift shelters for these people. Commuters often have to ride with individuals experiencing severe mental illness, and it could lead to increased violent attacks. And it's not just big cities. Even small towns are now dealing with increasing numbers of homelessness as people are pushed out of big urban centers due to overcrowding and crime.
Well, how could they let these people, especially females, live on the street like this?
Palm Desert resident John Barnwell told me he frequently makes trips to Indio, and he says he's shocked about what he sees when he's there.
And I see like 20 people behind there. I'm like, what are those people doing? It's open. So we kind of just went closer and realized it was just people of all ages that were living right there behind Denny's.
Barnwell feels the city should make more of an effort to address the growing crisis.
There's tons of old hotels that can be turned into shelters, maybe just for females only. And just let's try to get these people off the street.
So how can it be that in one of the richest countries in the world, the country with the largest GDP and a very good GDP per capita, there are almost 1 million people living on the streets? How can a nation that prides itself on being the land of opportunity allow entire city blocks to be overrun with tent encampments? How can a country that spends billions of dollars on foreign aid and military interventions around the world to protect foreigners fail to provide basic shelter for its own citizens? The truth is, there isn't just one simple reason behind this crisis. It's actually a mix of different factors that have all come together to create the disaster that we're seeing across America today. And in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how the homelessness crisis spiraled out of control and why, if things don't change, it's only going to get worse in the years ahead. One of the biggest differences we're witnessing in America compared to perhaps 30 years ago is that the wealth inequality, the wealth gap inequality is widening and the cost of living is getting worse. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that this can contribute to a rise in people becoming homeless. Over the past few decades, income inequality in the U.S. has been on the rise. According to the Pew Research Center, from 1970 to 2018, the median income of upper-income households increased by 64%, while middle-income households saw a 49% rise, and lower-income households gained only 43%. This disparity means that while the rich are getting richer, the earnings of the middle-income and lower-income families have not kept pace, leading to the significant wealth gap that we're seeing today. And as income growth for Americans has barely grown, the cost of living has surged, particularly in housing. It's so bad that in 2024, the median rent-to-income ratio reached 42% for the first time. That's crazy. Many Americans are paying nearly half of their income on rent. The combination of rising income inequality, increasing cost of living, all of this has a direct impact on homelessness. When housing costs consume a large portion of a household's income, especially for those earning less, it becomes a challenge to manage other expenses. Unexpected financial setbacks, such as medical emergencies, job losses, anything can happen, and this can lead to instability and eventually homelessness. In fact, so many Americans are on the edge. A survey revealed that 21% of people in America had no emergency savings at all, and nearly 37% couldn't afford an expense over $400. It's easy to blame this on financial illiteracy when you hear that over 1 in 5 Americans have no emergency savings. But the reality is far more complex. Sure, some people may not know how to budget correctly or might overspend on unnecessary things, but for millions, the problem isn't bad money management. It's that they simply don't have enough money to save in the first place. After spending everything on rent and food and other essentials, they barely have any money left. So while millions of Americans are dealing with a low standard of living, America is also facing another growing crisis that is affecting millions of people, and that's the intersection of mental health issues and substance abuse. Once there were mental asylums and long-term psychiatric hospitals where those with severe mental illnesses were housed and treated. However, most of these institutions closed decades ago, leaving many of these people without proper care. And today, many of them are homeless or in jail, trapped in cycles of addiction and suffering. In the 1960s, the United States began shutting down its mental asylums. At the time, this was seen as a step toward more humane treatment for people with mental illness. Many of these institutions had a reputation for being overcrowded, abusive, and poorly managed. The idea was that instead of locking people away in a massive institution, they could receive treatment in their own local communities, supported by newly developed psychiatric medications and outpatient mental health services, which made it possible for many patients to manage their conditions outside of a hospital setting. Politicians also pushed for change, with President John F. Kennedy signing the Community Mental Health Act in 1963. This law promised to replace asylums with community mental health centers where people could receive outpatient care while living at home. However, while the plan to close asylums may have been well-intentioned, it was not properly executed, and many of the promised community mental health centers were never built, and the ones that did exist were often underfunded and overwhelmed, and that left thousands of people with severe mental illnesses without proper care, the proper care that they needed. Instead of receiving proper treatment, many former asylum patients ended up on the streets or in jails. While mental health issues have been rising, so has drug addiction, especially opioid abuse. In recent years, the biggest problem has been fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that is 50 to 100 times more potent than other drugs. It's cheap, it's easy to produce, and it's incredibly deadly. The opioid crisis started in the 1990s when pharmaceutical companies pushed prescription painkillers like OxyContin, claiming that they were not addictive. Therefore, doctors prescribed these medications in large numbers and many people became hooked on it. When prescription opioids became harder to get, people just turned to other drugs and later fentanyl, which flooded the illegal drug market. Today, unfortunately, fentanyl is the leading cause of overdose deaths in the United States, and according to the CDC, over 100,000 Americans die from drug overdoses in a single year. Many of these mentally ill people lose all their savings, all their money to these addictions, and as a result, they end up on the streets. Yet, local governments continue to ignore this problem, rather focus on helping illegal immigrants instead of their own struggling citizens. Cities like New York and Los Angeles have become prime examples of weak leadership that neglect the needs of their local poor population, while funneling taxpayer money into programs that benefit illegal immigrants. Instead of using funds to help struggling American families, many leaders have focused on providing housing, cash assistance, and other benefits to those who entered the country illegally. And obviously, this has sparked outrage as more and more citizens feel abandoned by their very own government that is supposed to protect them, supposed to support them. In New York City, the issue has reached an extreme level. In response to the influx of illegal immigrants, city officials placed thousands of migrants in expensive hotel rooms, providing them with free meals, free health care, even prepaid debit cards. Meanwhile, many homeless New Yorkers, including veterans and people suffering from mental health issues, are often left to sleep on the streets or in overcrowded shelters. This city, already struggling with a housing crisis, skyrocketing rent prices, rising crime rates, has continued to spend billions on migrants while ignoring their own citizens. What makes the situation worse is that these cities are running out of money. New York City Mayor Eric Adams has already cut essential services like schools, police, and firefighters, while still finding billions of dollars to support migrants. Meanwhile, Los Angeles continues to approve benefit expansions for illegal immigrants, while many long-term residents are forced to leave the city because of the unaffordable rent, rising crime, and high taxes. This kind of weak leadership reflects a dangerous trend in major American cities. Instead of addressing the root causes of poverty and homelessness, leaders have just chosen to ignore their own struggling populations while prioritizing those who have entered the country illegally. If these policies continue, cities like New York and Los Angeles will only see worsening poverty and more homelessness, and that's exactly what's happening. And also deeper social divisions, where residents are leaving in record numbers, searching for other places to live because they feel like their city is ignoring them, their leaders are ignoring them. Finally, while many of America's biggest crises, drug addiction, crime, mental illness, homelessness, are widely discussed, I think one underlying issue, or probably the source of a lot of these problems, is a rise in divorce, the breakdown of the traditional family, for example. The structure of the American family has changed dramatically over the past several decades. In the past, marriage was seen as a lifelong commitment, and children were more likely to grow up in a stable two-parent households. Today, divorce rates are so high, single-parent households are so common, and many children are growing up without stability and without the guidance that a strong family provides. The American family began to change dramatically in the 1960s and 1970s, largely due to no-fault divorce laws, which made it easier for couples to separate. Before these laws, divorce required proof of wrongdoing, such as infidelity or abuse. Once no-fault divorce became legal, couples could end their marriage simply because they no longer want to be together. And as a result, divorce rates skyrocketed. In 1960, only 9% of children lived with one parent. By 1980, that number had risen to 19%. And today, approximately 1/4 of children in America live with a single parent. The breakdown of the family has devastating effects on children, especially when it comes to the problems we see today: drug addiction, criminal behavior, mental health issues. Numerous studies have found that children from divorced families are more likely to experiment with drugs and alcohol at a young age. And according to recent research, children from divorced families are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop substance abuse problems than those from intact families. The absence of a father also plays a critical role in a child's development. Studies have shown that children raised without fathers are more likely to engage in criminal activity. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, 85% of incarcerated youth come from fatherless homes. The lack of guidance, the lack of discipline, the lack of a male role model often push young boys towards gang involvement, towards violence. Without a strong parental presence, many young people look for acceptance in other places, like the streets. And so the president has a plan to tackle this. He wants to go after the cartels, which I think is great. Yeah, we need less of these people around, but I don't think that's going to solve the problem. I think homelessness and drug addiction will continue to rise regardless of what happens with the cartels, because there are underlying issues. There are core issues in our country that need to be addressed, like the wealth inequality, like the cost of living crisis, the closure and lack of mental institutions, and the destruction of the traditional family. And I think all of these factors came together to create the mess we're in today. But anyways, guys, let me know what you think. Why do you think there are so many people on the streets today in America? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to support the channel, all you got to do is leave a like or subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, I'm sure you're going to like this one here or this one here, and I'll see you in the next one.